Well, you also have the compassion aspect of it because, like, for the most part, like I said to Tim, I'm like, this is definitely a slippery slope talking about this because I know, especially like in my generation, and somewhat of generations before us and after us, women are struggling with infertility, and it's like if you were to dive deep and go down the rabbit hole of why we're seeing an astronomical number of women that have polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis. It's always tied to something, and it's like I said to Tim, I know the Gardasil shot, which was administered. I mean, I was probably 12 or 13 when they were pushing that on parents for young women to get that, and they did testing, I believe, over in India, and it sterilized a lot of young women, and then they apparently ironed out the kinks and brought it to America. And that generation of when they pushed it is where you're finding a lot of these women having unexplainable issues with endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or any other issues with infertility. So it's like, it is really sad that we're witnessing this left and right with people not being able to conceive, whether it's on the husband's side or the woman or the wife's side. You don't know. And I just feel like there's so many people that are yearning for families. So President Trump is looking at it like, because it is out of reach. IVF is so expensive. And then they didn't help the case when they decided to make adoption expensive as well. So people are like, what do we do? Do we, take the chance on having a biological child and paying all that money? Or do we adopt a child that we know biologically isn't ours? So it's really tough to make that call. So I feel like with him not having strong biblical convictions, it makes sense to me why he decided to go headlong into this, because you never know, it might be affecting his daughters. Maybe his oldest daughter went through it, we don't know. But I feel like if the biblical conviction is not there for the most part, that's why people do make excuses for in vitro fertilization.
Welcome to Tearing Down High Places. My name's Average Joe, and today I have the Robinsons. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Robinson.
Hi.
Hey,
I like
Joe.
the big R in the background there. Oh,
Yeah,
you can't see it anymore.
Yep.
I was looking at it.
That's for Robinson.
Getting all cozy over in your new pad, right? That's nice.
Yeah, a little bit. Trying to.
And Mare, congratulations, third trimester. Oh.
Thank you.
You want to do a belly dance or something?
No.
Yeah, probably not, right?
No.
So, speaking of babies, today on our podcast, we're going to talk about President Trump's first miss, in my humble opinion, his first miss on his executive orders, which have been phenomenal, man. You guys follow? I mean, can you guys even keep up with all the executive orders he's been putting out?
Seems like he's getting stuff done.
He does.
Yeah, well, trying to keep up the best that you can.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's definitely exciting stuff and so many good things. But I think as tearing down high places, I think the best thing we can do to love our brother President Trump, well, not brother, really, he doesn't claim to be a Christian, but he does seem to have a lot of Christian morals in his worldview, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we can help him by correcting him today, right?
Let's see it. I'll be watching it for the first time, I think, Joe.
Oh, okay. Let's play the clip. Ready? Go.
The first is an executive order relating to the affordability and availability of in vitro fertilization and other fertility treatments. These are treatments that have become unaffordable for many Americans, or have been unaffordable for many Americans. And the executive order is a directive to the Domestic Policy Council to examine ways to make IVF and other fertility treatments more affordable for more Americans.
All right, there's a little bit more. He said Trump came on after that.
Thank you very much, Will. That was the primary purpose of this conference, to explain that they're all very important in their own way. Fertilization, I've been saying that we're going to do what we have to do, and I think the women and families, husbands, are very appreciative of it. But that was it.
That was it. So he's saying that he wants federal monies to go towards helping women and men and families, as he said it, to engage in IVFs. Is that a problem?
It might be. It might be. I think it's a matter of conviction, but it's also a matter of what the word says. We'd have to probably dive deeper to see exactly what IVF is and look at some of the ugly stuff that might come along with it. So
yeah. I've got a 6-minute video we can jump into, but I think maybe we should talk a little bit about what the Bible has to say about fertilization and babies and killing babies. I mean, the big problem is when these eggs, and we can look at this in this video, when these eggs are fertilized, they're babies. Right? They use it, they're fertilized. They talk about it like we're talking about the golf course or your tomato garden, but it's
right. Yeah. Oh man.
That's not what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. And it you have to make a decision on, when does life start? Does it start at conception? Like most Christians believe it starts at conception. Some people don't think it starts until the baby's actually born, which I think we all agree that's wrong, because, right now I can touch my wife's belly and
there you go.
leave it there for a little bit. I'll feel a kick. No.
If anyone was wondering why Pastor Tim was like, oh, we got to bring on Mare, she's pregnant, right? Yeah.
Well, we'd like to have Mare anyway.
Yeah.
We like to have Mare anyway. We've always do great with Mare. But so it's gone so far. I mean, there is a lot of opinions out there and a lot of intramural opinions within Christianity, but the state of Alabama actually said that frozen embryos are life. They're alive. And there's I mean, that whole thing is still playing out in the courts as well. So I'm surprised that Trump isn't aware of that, or, well, I'm actually not surprised, but I'm saddened that he's chosen this route.
Yeah, I'm a little sad too. I'm always sad when there's compromise, right? This show, we try to, get rid of the compromise, and so it's a shame that basically if you're ever going to make it big as a politician, there seems to be, compromise that always happens to the people at the top. So I don't think I've seen anyone yet like fully go with no compromise as the president or vice president or in politics.
Right. Yeah, he's well, you know what? Look, no one bats 1,000. So
yeah, no one bats 1,000.
Well, you also have the compassion aspect of it, because like for the most part, like I said to Tim, I'm like, this is definitely a slippery slope talking about this, because I know, especially like in my generation, and somewhat of generations before us and after us, women are struggling with infertility. And it's like, if you were to dive deep and go down the rabbit hole of why we're seeing an astronomical number of women that have polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, it's always tied to something. And it's like, I said to Tim, I know the Gardasil shot, which was administered, I mean, I was probably 12 or 13 when they were pushing that on parents for young women to get that. And they did testing, I believe, over in India, and it sterilized a lot of young women. And then they apparently ironed out the kinks and brought it to America. And that generation of when they pushed it is where you're finding a lot of these women having unexplainable issues with endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or any other, issues with infertility. So it's like, it is really sad that we're witnessing this left and right with people not being able to conceive, whether it's on the husband's side or the woman or the wife's side. You don't know. And I just feel like there's so many people that are yearning for families. Yeah. So President Trump is looking at it like, because it is out of reach. IVF is so expensive. And then they didn't help the case when they decided to make adoption expensive as well. So people are like, what do we do? Do we, take the chance on having a biological child and
Right.
paying all that money, or do we adopt a child that we know biologically isn't ours? So it's really tough to make that call. So I feel like with him not having strong biblical convictions, it makes sense to me why he decided to go headlong into this, because you never know, it might be affecting his daughters. Maybe his oldest daughter went through it, we don't know.
Yeah.
But I feel like if the biblical conviction is not there for the most part, that's why people do make excuses for in vitro fertilization.
Yeah. I think we have a president worldview squatter. He definitely squats in the Christian worldview, and we welcome that. We're grateful for it, right? Even though he doesn't claim to be a Christian yet. So hopefully we're praying for that as well. But and his insight is correct. We want to have bigger families. We need bigger families. We have a shortage of babies, big time, not just from not just from the 60 million babies that we aborted, but in addition, just families are just not having the numbers that they used to, and we're not reproducing ourselves. We're all supposed to, I think you're supposed to have 2.3 to stay at this 2.3 babies per woman in order to stay even.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And we're not. I mean,
hey, are we?
Three is a lot.
I think there still is a call to be fruitful and multiply as a human, right? And
yeah, that's the first commandment, right?
Yeah, and I think in many other generations, especially in the ancient world, I think even biblically, they valued having kids, and that was, one of the main, rewards that parents get is children. And
if we got that commandment right, we would have, we might have been able to avoid some of the other commandments we don't like.
maybe. Hey, and even in the ancient world, there were many cultures that valued fertility, and they even made up gods and worship gods of fertility, and they were searching for that. And then even in the Bible, there was many women who were barren, and they prayed to the Lord, and they got kids, or the Lord saw their affliction or their pain and had mercy on them and gave them kids. And Samuel is one of them. Samson is one of them. Leah having some of the tribes of Israel, and then her sister Rachel, who was barren. And then you have Abraham's wife Sarah, who wanted a son so badly, and then even went away from God's will and had her slave woman sleep with Abraham. But God promised her that she would have a son, and she didn't get that. She had to wait a long time. Some people, they take one pregnancy test. It's like, oh no, but she had to wait till 90 years old.
Joe, he's speaking from experience.
It is. Joe, my heart breaks because me and Mare, we wanted to have kids right away. And I think the very first pregnancy test we took came back negative, and we were like, and it's like, but picture women doing that for, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. Yeah. My heart breaks for them.
Yeah.
But are they aligning themselves with God's will? Are they praying for a child? Are they doing everything they can in that area before they jump into something like IVF?
Well, let's talk about the behavior of our culture. I mean, you guys are just married. You just turned 30, right?
Well, no, we're about to hit 31.
Yeah. 31.
So, I count every 5 or 10 years now. But anyway, so the age difference, right, between when people get married now and when they, 100 years ago is over a decade.
Yeah.
I mean, people, you could be an old maid at 20. Right.
Right.
50 years ago, 100 years, not 50, but 100 years ago. And so people are having babies in their 40s, and it's hard. I mean, to go out and have a career and then expect that you should be able to have more than 1 or 2 children is not really going to happen. And that's really impacting our culture. I mean, those are behaviors that we're choosing, or maybe those aren't good choices. What do you think? Are they biblical choices?
I think people are choosing comfort too long, and then they finally want to have, kids when they want to have kids. Even in IVF, it's kind of like you're deciding when you have kids instead of kind of just trusting God. You know what, Lord, I'll still serve you whether I have kids or whether I'm not blessed with kids.
Yeah.
So I think it's a comfortability aspect, and it's convenient for a lot of these women and men to get pregnant without even being husband or wife, or without even being married. I wonder what the stat is on, the amount of people who are born out of wedlock nowadays. It's got to be higher than most generations, right?
Massive, massive,
Yeah.
huge. We've destroyed marriage. I talk about this all the time, and I don't want this episode to go that route because I just get on a tirade. But I mean, we've destroyed marriage. It's hard to witness to somebody and say, oh, but when they know that you've got to submit to a marriage yoke, and that's not something people want because but they're not thinking about a Christian marriage. They're thinking about the marriage they've seen.
Well, talking about addressing just biblical marriages, it's like, just like Tim bringing up scripture and, so many different women in the Bible that were, praying to have a child, like they were yearning for that. And Tim and I constantly have these discussions, and I'm like, the whole point, like one of the main points in being married is to have children. And
Right.
it's like, I said to Tim, I'm like, it obviously God's plan was a little bit different in when Tim and I met and when Tim and I got married, because we were, 30 when we got married. So, but I said to Tim, I'm like, I expressed to him all the time, like if I would have much rather preferred to have kids younger rather than older. Like it would have been great to have been married at 20 years old and then have had kids and, have been able to multiply, younger rather than older. And you're meeting so many people nowadays that, have this mentality where it's like, I want to have this time with my spouse. Like they have that level of, selfishness. And
Right.
it's not like there are other circumstances in life that change that like outlook, but for the most part it's like, well, we want our time together, to sit there and get to know one another before we bring a child into this world. But Tim and I laugh because we literally, both of our mothers had 3 kids by the age of 26. My mom's last child, she had 4, was at 32, and then you said your mom had 5 kids by the age of 32 or 31.
Yeah, 31.
So we're like, it was a different generation back then to think like, if
and
this,
even the generation before that.
yeah, like if this be, yeah, both of
Actually,
our
my
parents.
mom was telling me the other day, her great grandmom got married young to an older man, had 8 kids with him, and then I think he passed away. She remarried to a younger man, and then had 8 more kids.
16 kids?
16 kids by one
Wow.
woman. And then and then I think my grandmom had she had 8 kids, and then her grandmom I think had a bunch of kids. But yeah, it's kind of
Irish
I think
Catholics?
it also shrunk each generation now.
Yeah, and
Were they Irish Catholics?
They sure were.
Yeah, I thought so.
And the funny thing is, Joe, both of my parents are the youngest of 7. So you're sitting here and you're thinking like, what was the difference in the thought process with people back then than there are now? And it's like, I don't want to, speak out of turn, but I feel like it is a level of selfishness. Like a lot of people have asked me, they're like, did you and Tim plan this? And I was like, well, I guess you could say we did and we didn't, because we didn't know when it was going to happen. But, we went in knowing full right well that we were hoping we would be able, mainly praying that we'd be able to have children sooner rather than later.
Yep. I think first of all, people put off marriage. They put it off for money. I know I did. I didn't become a Christian until I was 35, and I know I put it off for selfish reasons. So, and I regretted it. I mean, totally regret it. I would have loved that 10 kids. I'm Irish.
Yeah. And sometimes you
maybe
just gotta,
16. That sounds good too.
Right. And sometimes you just got to take that step by faith, and follow the desire that the Lord is giving you, not, worry about every little thing. And so you have every single duck in a row. Sometimes you can't, it's not the drag of death. It's the leap of faith, right?
Yeah. You can't sit around, I got to have X amount of dollars and I got to have, you really don't. You talk about, I know people that have endometriosis or however you say it. And I can't have any kids, and it's sad. And I know my mom, she had my sister 3 years, she at 23, and then she couldn't have kids anymore. She had 2 kids and then she couldn't have kids. Well, what if she waited and then couldn't have kids? If she
and I think the Lord has a heart for adoption. I think he loves adoption. Are we not all adopted as sons and daughters?
Well, hey, man, we almost lost adoption a few years ago because the Christian adoption agencies were no longer allowed to adopt because we wouldn't bend the knee to the secular culture who said we had to, violate our religious convictions about in the adoption process. And honestly, I think we have violated. That's another area for
Oh man, we're trying to tear down
down
too many things at once.
Yeah, that whole adoption nonsense. It's a horrible place. It's a horrible system. Anyway, and it's all part of Social Security, which Trump's trying to go after too. I think. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh man.
Maybe
But the
we'll
main thing we're talking about is IVF. Joe, maybe you can define IVF. Or
you know what? Why don't I play the video? It's a 6-minute video. It's a TED Talk. And this way we're not going to be just guessing at what we think we know. Let's see that.
In 1978, Louise Brown became the world's first baby to be born by in vitro fertilization, or IVF. Her birth revolutionized the field of reproductive medicine. Given that approximately 1 in 8 heterosexual couples has difficulty conceiving, and that homosexual couples and single parents often need clinical help to make a baby, the demand for IVF has been growing. IVF is so common that more than 5 million babies have been born through this technology. IVF works by mimicking the brilliant design of sexual reproduction. In order to understand IVF, we first need to take a look at the natural process of baby making. Believe it or not, it all starts in the brain. Roughly 15 days before fertilization can happen, the anterior pituitary gland secretes follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH, which ripens a handful of follicles of the ovary that then release estrogen. Each follicle contains 1 egg, and on average, only 1 follicle becomes fully mature. As it grows and continues to release estrogen, this hormone not only helps coordinate growth and preparation of the uterus, it also communicates to the brain how well the follicle is developing. When the estrogen level is high enough, the anterior pituitary releases a surge of luteinizing hormone, LH, which triggers ovulation and causes the follicle to rupture and release the egg. Once the egg leaves the ovary, it is directed into the fallopian tube by the finger-like fimbriae. If the egg is not fertilized by sperm within 24 hours, the unfertilized egg will die, and the entire system
Wait a minute. Did she say die? Okay, I'm going back.
will reset itself, preparing to create a new egg and uterine lining the following month. The egg is the largest cell in the body and is protected by a thick extracellular shell of sugar and protein called the zona pellucida. The zona thwarts the entry and fusion of more than 1 sperm, the smallest cell in the body. It takes a man 2 to 3 months to make sperm, and the process constantly renews. Each ejaculation during sexual intercourse releases more than 100 million sperm, but only 100 or so will ultimately make it to the proximity of the egg, and only 1 will successfully penetrate through the armor of the zona pellucida. Upon successful fertilization, the zygote immediately begins developing into an embryo and takes about 3 days to reach the uterus. There, it requires another 3 or so days to implant firmly into the endometrium, the inner lining of the uterus. Once implanted, the cells that are to become the placenta secrete a hormone that signals to the ovulated follicle that there is a pregnancy in the uterus. This helps rescue that follicle, now called the corpus luteum, from degenerating, as it normally would do in that stage of the menstrual cycle. The corpus luteum is responsible for producing the progesterone required to maintain the pregnancy until 6 to 7 weeks of gestation, when the placenta develops and takes over until the baby is born approximately 40 weeks later. Now, how do you make a baby in a lab? In patients undergoing IVF, FSH is administered at levels that are higher than naturally occurring to cause a controlled overstimulation of the ovaries so that they ultimately produce multiple eggs. The eggs are then retrieved just before ovulation would occur, while the woman is under anesthesia through an aspirating needle that is guided by ultrasound. Most sperm samples are produced by masturbation. In the laboratory, the identified eggs are stripped of surrounding cells and prepared for fertilization in a petri dish. Fertilization can occur by one of two techniques. In the first, the eggs are incubated with thousands of sperm, and fertilization occurs naturally over a few hours. The second technique maximizes certainty of fertilization by using a needle to place a single sperm inside the egg. This is particularly useful when there is a problem with the quality of the sperm. After fertilization, embryos can be further screened for genetic suitability, frozen for later attempted pregnancies, or delivered into the woman's uterus via catheter. Common convention is to transfer the embryo 3 days after fertilization, when the embryo has 8 cells, or on day 5, when the embryo is called a blastocyst and has hundreds of cells. If the woman's eggs are of poor quality due to age or toxic exposures or have been removed due to cancer, donor eggs may be used. In the case that the intended mother has a problematic uterus or lacks one, another woman, called a gestational carrier or surrogate, can use her uterus to carry the pregnancy. To increase the odds of success, which are as high as 40% for a woman younger than 35, doctors sometimes transfer multiple embryos at once, which is why IVF results in twins and triplets more often than natural pregnancies. However, most clinics seek to minimize the chances of multiple pregnancies, as they are riskier for mothers and babies. Millions of babies, like Louise Brown, have been born from IVF and have had normal, healthy lives. The long-term health consequences of ovarian stimulation with IVF medicines are less clear, though so far, IVF seems safe for women. Because of better genetic testing, delayed childbearing, increased accessibility, and diminishing costs, it's not inconceivable that artificial baby making via IVF and related techniques could outpace natural reproduction in years to come.
Wow, that's wild.
My favorite big word that I learned today was zona pellucida.
Yeah.
Not because I just because it sounded cool.
I was gonna say you have to use that in a sentence this coming week.
Yeah.
Find
So
a way.
I don't think I'm gonna be able to find a way to put that into a sentence.
That's gonna be in one ear out the other for me.
Yeah. I mean, unless I'm talking to my wife. Hey, guess what I watched with Tim and Mare? Anyway. So that was a very pro IVF process video, but there was nothing negative about that, right? So that was all the plus side stuff. First thing I noticed was they talked about the egg dying. Now, I don't think we would hold to that, right? We would believe that the proverbial clump of cells at that point, but at the problem that we do have a problem with is once that sperm hits that egg, now we do have a life. And what happens to that? What happens to that after that point is the problem, right?
Yeah. And how many millions of people did they say are IVF babies?
Oh my gosh, a lot. Yeah.
5 million?
I think it was 5 million.
Yeah.
Now, how many of those, well, not of those, but how many more babies that did reach fertilization, did reach that point of life that were frozen or discarded? That's a stat that I would like to know.
Well, the best stats are never taken because it costs money and there's always a motive, right? There's always a motive to pay for the statisticians to take the information down because this is work, right?
But we also have to ask now, those frozen fertilized eggs, which we view as life, now if we discard them or we freeze them and never use them, would that be murder? And are you murdering a certain number of babies to get one life? Is that morally right? That's something we have to ask, and I think something that we need to be considering if we're going to choose IVF.
Yeah, so I think it was the Supreme Court in Alabama decided that frozen embryos are life.
Talk about the frozen chosen. Man, that's sad to hear, man. That's sad to hear. And they're saying that the end of that video was saying eventually this method of reproduction is going to outpace natural birth. I don't like that at all. I want to just keep doing it the way God designed it to do it.
Oh, me too.
That's my view on it. Let's not do that out of convenience ever. That's the first thing. Let's aim to do it by the will of God and do it the way that God designed.
Yeah. So completely agree. Let me give you this date first before I forget. It was February 16th, 2024. So just about a year ago, Alabama Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos are considered children under state law. The ruling applies to in vitro fertilization, embryos, and implications for fertility treatments. Wild. Now, I don't know if that's being fought in still. I'm imagining it is. But that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. I mean, that's really positive. I love seeing that the court would do that.
Alabama gets a thumbs up there.
Sweet home.
Alabama.
Yeah. But what you were just referring,
is it morally right or is it murder?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about, or were you thinking?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely murder. I mean, it's murder in Alabama.
Yeah, if it's murder in Alabama, it's
not here.
Murder everywhere.
The objective truth of when life begins. Unfortunately, conversations I've had, I think the pro baby killing groups they're starting to come around to where, yeah, it's a baby, but you know what? It's my body, and I can tell that baby to get out. Now,
did you catch the point when it said in the video that most of the IVF semen comes from masturbation?
Yeah, I did.
Now, I'm not sure how else that would come, but like, that's horrible. I don't know if this is true, Joe, but I heard that in most cases they bring you into a room and they make you watch porn and then you masturbate to that porn. I don't know if you heard. Is that true, Joe? I heard that before.
I know it for a fact. I know it's true. It is.
Now, there's some problems with that. Right there, is that a sin? Can you do that against the Lord, to masturbate in a room to other women that are not your wife?
Right.
And then on top of that, did we not say that all porn is gay, Joe?
We did say all porn is gay. We sure did. All porn is gay. And yeah, just to emphasize that, I got a little graphic there.
We need to get that out there, because you know what? I think a lot of men are prideful, and once they hear and know and contemplate and think about all porn being gay, maybe that would be something that would make them stop watching porn. Because most men I know that are manly men, they don't want to be gay, called gay, referred to as gay, even thought of maybe being gay. So
we should shame people, right? Good, Mayor. Sorry.
You also heard in the video, they specifically stated like who they were targeting, like people who have infertility, homosexual couples who clearly cannot do it on their own.
Right.
And like that, Tim asking for statistics, like that's what I would like to know. It's like, how many of these babies are, being produced for homosexual couples, or, utilizing a surrogate. Because it's like, it's a lot of controversy there, with, them putting their, fertilized egg within somebody else to house that baby. And you're just sitting there and you're like, it's constantly like, I feel it's constant compromise when you're, discussing the whole process of IVF.
And it's all against the design of God. I mean, no kid should have to grow up with two dads, like, basically that are together in a marriage relationship that obviously is not a marriage, it's a mirage. But how confused must that child be growing up with parents that are that confused and trying to navigate through life when they're so far outside of God's original design?
Yep.
We got to pray for kids like that. I feel so bad, because I would not want to be in that kid's position. I would not. Yeah. And I would never want to put a kid in that position.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you're talking about with porn, because that's how these kids come about, and they get their bad habits from their families and their parents. But I think the so-called statistics say that 80% of all men, I think it's 80% of all men watch porn. That's a big number.
Yeah, that's
a really big number. You are not going to have people that are engaged in pornographic use holding a biblical sexual ethic or fighting for it. They might be okay with us voting alongside with them, right? Because we're putting down the crazy on the other side.
Yeah,
they're not going to fight hard for a biblical sexual morality when they're watching pornography. Do you think?
I think I've seen a lot of videos where porn kind of ruins your brain and the way you think, and it ruins your drive and your motivation, and it distorts your mind, and you can't appreciate real sex the way you should. And I've seen a lot of studies where it looks like it it kind of deteriorates some of your brain. So I don't know if it's an addiction or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not interested in that. And, you know, morally, yeah, I'm part of that 20% proudly.
Well, and I'm gonna tell you that I struggled with porn when I first became a Christian, and I know a lot of other Christians that struggle with it after that have been Christians their whole life. And I've talked to men about it, and it really is hard to stop. But all bad habits are hard.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. It's a habit. I don't even like that word addiction. I think addiction is a psychological term to give people an excuse for ending a bad habit.
Right. It's a bad habit, but we also have
sinful habit.
But let's call it more than a bad habit. It's a sin.
Yeah,
you know?
a sinful habit. Yeah.
You know, when you look at a woman with lust that isn't your wife, you know, the Lord says that you're committing adultery.
Yeah.
So you're looking at naked women or whatever it is, men and women, whatever it is, you can see, think about it, it's all gay. And you look at that and it's just, how could you
Wait, what did you say?
It's all gay. How can you do that and think that that's okay in the eyes of the Lord? How can you do that and think, oh, this is great. You know, this is for myself, and this is, you know, nothing's wrong with this. No, there's a lot of things wrong.
Yeah, the way that we have to explain it to other men, and I'm reading a statistic here, by the way. I just Googled this statistic. It says approximately 69% of American men and 40% of American women view online porn each year. Pornhub alone reported more than 2 billion visits in a single month in 2023.
Oh, that's horrible.
So anyway, I don't know how that stacks up, but multiple conversations with other men about this, and I've had other Christian men complain to me, well, you know, I don't have a wife, or it's too dangerous to get married again, or, you know, if I don't do that, I'm going to end up having sex with some woman that I'm not married to. Excuse after excuse. But here's the thing: it's they've got to be seeking holiness, and they have to be pursuing something good, not just trying to put down something bad.
Right.
The Bible tells us to rip and replace, right? To just cut it off, replace that sin with something good. And if you're not pursuing holiness, and if you're not on a quest to really to pursue that, you can't beat that. If you're just trying to not sin, or just stay over the line of what you consider good, that's the problem. These guys are sitting there and they're going to say, okay, well, I got, you know, I have a porn problem, so I'm going to let the gay guy, I'm not going to call the gay guys bad.
Right. Yeah.
But those transsexuals, yeah, we hate those. I'm not that bad. You know, it's that whole relativist morality thing that we do all the time. Well, you know, we when we go out and witness, we talk to people, and that's what they think. They're like, well, I'm a pretty good person.
Yeah, right.
I'm a pretty good person. I might watch a little porn, but at least I'm not cutting off people's genitals.
Yeah. Don't compare yourself to the world, you know.
That's the problem.
Standard is Christ. I mean, and the only reason we do sin and we start thinking the wrong way is because we love to do it. We love to sin. But when we find Jesus, we realize, wow, my love now is for Jesus and righteousness and holiness and following after him. That's what makes it easy to put all that away, because you found something way better than your old life. You found something way better than the sin you love. Yeah. You're finding the living God, realizing that he has called you for a purpose and he has a plan for your life that's a lot better than the way your life was going before that.
Yeah. I don't even like looking at anything like I look at my wife. I tell my wife all the time, she's like, we can watch this movie. I'm like, no, we can't. I'm not watching that. Because I know there's this thing, or there's going to be, and I'm not fast forwarding through it either. You know, that's not adequate. Right.
My wife told me my one eye is for Jesus and my other eye is for her.
and you know what? I'm going to tell you for experience. And my oh gosh, I hope she's not watching. If Janice Biddle's watching, she got mad at me in the marriage class all the time because I'd always bring up my ex-wife. Well, I'm gonna bring up my ex-wife right here. So before I was a Christian, you know, I shared that I had a pornography issue, and even after I tried stopping that, and I'm still watching R-rated movies that have sexual scenes in them and stuff like that. When I got married to my wife, totally different ethic. My second wife, my covenant wife, I am always getting every ounce of sexual satisfaction from looking at her only. And it's so awesome because I'm always looking forward to seeing her.
That's a good way to put it, Joe.
I'm gonna like circle this back around, because when we're talking about like, you know, constant compromise in the process of IVF, it's funny that I don't know if there's any other states, like I haven't researched it enough, and I'm not even going to pretend like I know that much about IVF, but you know, you bringing up that Alabama does look at those frozen embryos as pretty much a child. And the thing is, it's like it said within the video, they don't hide it. It's when they do, so basically when they retrieve the egg and they put it in a petri dish, and then they take, it's called like intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So they take the sperm and they inject that little sperm into like what they would say the cytoplasm of the egg to hopefully fertilize it. It becomes what they call a blastocyst, which literally it occurs 5 to 6 days after fertilization. So for people to sit there and act like they can deny that, it's like that's scientific fact that we even watched in that liberal video.
Right.
So you're sitting here and you're thinking like, why is it that Alabama is the only state right now, I guess, like from, you know, because you brought it up, is the only one at the forefront of this for people to understand, like, when you're putting to, like, I think it's funny how it's like you watch the video of how they retrieve the egg, and a woman has to be put to sleep for that. That's not something that's, I guess you could say, non-invasive, where they're wide awake.
Ooh.
They're
See
put
that
to
needle?
sleep.
What's that
Yeah.
needle look like?
It's
Going in your ovary?
yeah, it's pretty tiny, but they go in, like, of course, go up, and they said it's kind of like, I do actually, let me not quote that because I might be wrong, but of course they retrieve the egg, the woman is asleep and everything like that. And you think of like, how do they do everything with abortion? They're going, you know, they're suctioning the child out and everything else like that. And it's like, you're like, there's too many assimilations that are being made here. And if you're consciously knowing full right well that you're, especially if you're putting, you know, being pregnant off for a while, and then you're like, okay, let me do IVF to freeze my eggs or anything like that. You're sitting here and you're thinking to yourself, like, you know, you're not going to utilize all of those children. You already have the mindset that you're thinking like, either I'm going to freeze my eggs because of the fact that I'm not ready right now, or you find out that it's going to be a struggle, or in those cases where these couples are homosexual, it's like, you know darn it well you're not using all of these eggs. So it's like I said to Tim, I know it's really sad, and I know a lot of people don't want to hear it, but it's like premeditated murder. It's just like with abortion, when you lie down with somebody else knowing full right well how a child is conceived, and then you sit there and say, well, I'm not ready for this, so, and I'm in that stage of life, or however many excuses you come to terms with, and then you sit there and think like, I can just discard this child. It realistically is the same thing with IVF. You're not, they could I said to Tim, they could retrieve 10 eggs. They could fertilize those 10 eggs. Say 3 of them don't work, and say 5 of them, you know, you are able to utilize 5, and you have 5 children. Those remaining 5 that you're like, oh, well, my husband and I are done. You're literally just taking a child and throwing them in the trash, because you're done, and you're good and done.
What's that child's state of mind at that moment when they are so they're frozen? Like, I mean, they're slowing down. I mean, they have feeling. They have nerve endings come really quick. I don't know if it's 4 or 5 days, but I mean, where's that soul?
It's got to be somewhere inside of that embryo. And
what are we doing? What are we thinking? Why are we allow that at all?
Honestly, thinking about it more, it makes me think I wouldn't recommend IVF to anybody.
No. Now, I'll say something else though. What if there were Christian IVF facilities that only did 1 egg at a time and made sure that one fertilized egg was treated like another human being?
I think that would be a lot better. I still would be very cautious to make sure you're praying and you're thinking about, is this what God wants me to do? Before you make a decision like that. But if there were, you know, say a Christian IVF, I would highly recommend that over the other one. But I would still say, hey, maybe is it possible that the Lord is calling you to something else, maybe to not have children. Maybe that's his will for your life. Do you want to follow that and say, you know what, Lord, if it's your will to have me children, or for me to bear children, open up my womb or open up my wife's womb. Isaac prayed that for Rebecca, and Rebecca bore twins. Now, would it be bad, Joe? Also, one more thing. Would it be bad, say a woman is pregnant with triplets and says, you know what, I only wanted one. Would it be bad to kill two of them in the womb and just let one be born?
Probably no big deal. It's her choice, isn't
it? But if you have a problem with that, like you shouldn't you also have a problem with IVF only choosing one?
Yeah. I like how you're constantly pointing people back to what's God's will in this situation. And what I think God's will is that he wants us to stop mixing with the pagans, and that we need to take back our religious freedom as the gift it was before it's completely gone, because it is so gone in all these areas. We should not be allowing our government to be involved in determining our health care, because and if we can't see it now, look at this, look at all the evil things that are happening in our hospitals under and the government is controlling this through insurance companies, right? The government's mandating the insurance companies do X, Y, and Z. It's an illegal thing. The hospitals go, oh, we can't do anything. It's the insurance companies and the government. Everybody's blaming somebody else. And while the Christians going, well, okay, well, I guess I'll have to do it because I have no other choice. But no, we've got to stop. Healthcare, we've got the government in marriage, we've got the government in IVF, we've got the government. What about just, Trump coming on, right? The first thing we watched.
Yep.
Why is he involved? Why does he think the government should be involved in IVF at all?
I have no clue. I'm not sure.
He said it's the cost, Tim.
Yeah, the cost. Yeah, the cost. I mean, Trump does like to lower the cost, but yeah, it is expensive to do all this, right?
It's something that we're going to have friends that did this bad thing or that bad thing. And we've always got to approach them, I guess, with compassion, but say, hey, look, Tim, how do you do it? Tell me, as a pastor, how do you approach someone in compassion, knowing that you've got to address that sin issue to really help them? You can't help them without them seeing their sin. So you've got to address that, but how do you do it in a compassionate way?
Well, actually, Jeff sent out an email not too long ago talking about how love is always combined with truth. And you have to understand the truth to understand love and understand how to react with love. So I think, the righteous, they rejoice in the truth. And, someone might not like you for telling the truth, but they're going to respect you later on, hopefully, if they're thinking properly later on, understanding that someone speaking the truth to you is trying to help you understand what's right, help you understand what's true. And it's really the loving thing to do is to tell someone the truth, especially if it's something that they need to hear, especially salvation.
Always.
Man, if someone is not saved, I'm going to try to convince you the best that I can. And if they say, I have a feeling you're trying to convert me. Yes, I am. I'm trying to convert you. It's not a secret, I am trying to convert you because I love you and I want you to understand that hell is a real place and that you will go there if you keep going down this path of sin until you understand that you're a sinner and you need a savior, and that savior is Jesus, and Jesus would have never came if you could have saved yourself. But why did Jesus come? It's because we needed to be saved. And until you recognize that and realize that, you're not going to understand salvation, and you're not going to understand that, what is good and what is bad.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's a tough thing. We got to fight back to it. Let's pray that President Trump would have some good Christian advisors around him, but he hasn't been picking his Christian advisors very well, has he?
I don't know. He hasn't been picking. I think he has that one female pastor who
Paula White.
Mahanda rabosoko, mahanda akasata, reke yamanda raboko sokota, ronda yakande eke seke la mama manda rabakase, meta rabakande la babakaso, yalamana niana no, sakayato yakande, yamakato yabatadia city akano yakatara city power.
Yeah, Paula White. That's not a good message, but keep praying. Hopefully, he's got 3 more years. Hopefully he'll figure that out a little bit. I don't want him to keep appeasing people or not understanding. We need to pray that President Trump starts reading the Bible and trying to apply it.
Yeah.
Understand it.
He's a smart guy, man.
Yep.
He can handle it. He needs we need to pray the Holy Spirit comes over him and just tells him to do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
And everyone else out there, if you've listened to this and you don't read your Bible, I was just gonna say, like, when someone said there are two groups of people that when they accuse me of trying to convert them, I deny it. I say to Jews and to Catholics.
Why is that?
Because I tell them, I just want you to read your Bible. And in my head, I'm saying, and the Bible will convert you.
That's good. We do want them to be in the Word. There's so many people in my life where I've tried to communicate the gospel to them so much, and it's to the point where they need to read it for themselves. Read the Word. I want them to keep hearing it, but there's nothing like seeing it for yourself and reading it and knowing that this is from God. Knowing that he has words for you to hear, and there's nothing like it. It changes your soul.
And as good as the movies are, The Chosen, Charlton Heston, and the 10 Commandments, they're not accurate. People don't know. A lot of people think they've read the Bible if they've seen a movie about it.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my gosh, now they're making ones that are the 10 Commandments, the first 40 minutes was not biblical, right? With Charlton Heston. Then nothing. I mean, really nothing.
Yeah, there's a lot of mix. Even in The Chosen, there's a lot of scenes that they just add because it's Hollywood. I understand they have to, throw some of that stuff in there. But when you read the Bible, you have to know that that's the word of God right there, and it can change your life because it's true, and the truth will set you free.
And there's a reason for every word. It's all there for a purpose, to guide us, to do. There's something we can do with every word. I don't know what to do with a lot of those words yet.
And some people just are not. Yeah, right. And some people just don't understand that. They'll say, "Oh, well, I grew up in the church. I understand everything. Oh, the Bible, I read that when I was a kid. I went to, Vacation Bible School, and I read the whole thing there." No, you didn't. Stop lying to yourself. Read the Bible. Read it again. Because Pastor Jeff, he's a pastor of the church, and guess what? He's going through the Bible again in a whole nother year. So it's not something you ever graduate from, understanding and reading the Bible. It's something that you're called to do your whole life.
Yeah, I was listening to one pastor was saying that he's every other time he reads the King James version, which was his original Bible, but then every other time between that, when he reads through the entire Bible, he reads a different version, just so he doesn't get stale or thinks he knows it all.
Not bad. I like
anyway. That's a technique. Well, that was a good episode. I mean, I think it was really important that we mentioned this and we talked about this today. And
all right, man. So when you see when you see a high place, you tear it down.
No, you got to pick the brother up first.
Oh man. Okay, cut that out, Joe.
When you see a brother down, pick him up. When you see a high place, tear it down.